She was already in the bathroom when I woke up that Friday morning. I could hear the hairdryer going, the particular way she'd pause it every few seconds like she was checking something. After 17 years, you know a person's routines better than your own. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan and thought, she's going. She's actually going. Her name was Miriam. Mine is Joel. Except that's one of the names from the list. Let me back up. My name's Brent, and this is the story of the quietest decision I ever made and how it changed everything. Miriam and I met in our late 20s at a mutual friend's backyard cookout in Raleigh. She was laughing at something when I first saw her. That big, unguarded laugh she had back then. Head tilted back, not caring who heard. I brought her a beer she didn't ask for, and she looked at me like I was either very confident or very presumed upon. We talked until midnight, standing next to a dead fire pit. 6 months later, we were living together. A year after that, married. For a long time, it was good. Not perfect. Nothing is. But good in the way that a well-built house is good. Solid. Dependable. You stop noticing it mostly, but it holds. The cracks started showing maybe 4 years ago. She'd started working commercial real estate, which sounds like it shouldn't matter, but it meant her whole world shifted. New clients, new dinners, new vocabulary. She started saying things like pivoting and leveraging relationships, unironically. I'm an aviation mechanic. I've worked the same regional airport for 11 years. I care about torque specs and fuel line integrity. I don't pivot. His name was Stafford. I know. The name sounds like a character someone invented, but that was genuinely his name. Stafford Kine. He was a commercial developer, early 40s, had that particular kind of confidence you get from never having to wonder where next month's rent is coming from. She'd met him through a listing. Within 6 months, he was her biggest client. Within a year, she was telling me I was emotional limited. I'm not going to pretend I didn't see it coming. I did. I just didn't know what to do with what I saw. So, I did what I always do when something is wrong. I got quiet, and I watched, and I waited to see if I was misreading the situation. I wasn't misreading anything. The trip came up in March. She said it was a real estate conference in Scottsdale. 4 days, industry networking, a hotel block near the convention center. She showed me the registration confirmation on her laptop screen, standing in the kitchen while I was making coffee, like it was a formality. Stafford will be there too, she said. Not casually, deliberately. I turned around. Of course he will. It's a professional conference, Brent. I didn't say anything. You didn't have to. That was the thing about the last 2 years of our marriage. Half our conversations happened in the silence between what we actually said. She went back to her laptop. I finished my coffee. That night I lay in bed running numbers in my head. Not about money, just logistics. How this was going. Where it was headed. What the floor looked like once you found it. 2 weeks later I brought it up directly. I told her I didn't feel right about her going to Scottsdale with Stafford. Not alone. Not as things had been between us lately. She listened, arms crossed, and when I finished, she said, I hear you. I'm still going. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I need you to understand something, I said. If you go on that trip, you and I are done. She held my eyes. Didn't flinch. Didn't soften. That sounds like an ultimatum, she said. It is? She nodded slowly, the way someone nods when they've already made their decision and your input is just a procedural formality. I'll be back Sunday night. She walked out of the kitchen. I stood there next to the empty coffee pot and realized I'd just told her I was done. And I'd meant it. The thing people don't understand about quiet men is that quiet isn't the same as passive. I've been watching our marriage deteriorate for 2 years, and I've been thinking, the entire time, about what I would do when the moment came that required me to do something. I'm a mechanic. I think in systems. I think about what breaks, why it breaks, and what needs to happen after. Our marriage had broken. I'd known it for a while. She'd just given me the confirmation I needed to stop waiting. I called my brother Darren the morning after that conversation. Darren's an attorney in Durham. Not family law specifically, he does corporate work, but he knows everyone and he's never given me bad advice in my life. Are you sure? He asked. I've been sure for 8 months, I said. I just needed to say it out loud first. He gave me a name. Sandra Pruitt. Family law. Sharp as a tack. Doesn't drag things out. I called her that same afternoon. We met the following Tuesday. I sat in her office and told her everything methodically, like I was writing a discrepancy report on a faulty landing gear. She listened without interrupting, and when I was done, she said, You've thought about this more than most people who sit in that chair. I've had time, I said. We started the paperwork. Miriam left on a Thursday. She packed the night before. Efficient, focused, barely said 2 words at dinner. When she kissed me goodbye Friday morning, it was the kind of kiss you give a coworker at Christmas. Appropriate, without warmth. I watched her car pull out of the driveway from the front window. Then I made a fresh pot of coffee and went to work. There's something clarifying about making a decision and then acting on it. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't angry or sad. I was both, at different hours of the day in ways that moved around on me without warning. But underneath all of that was something solid. I was done waiting. I was moving. The first photos appeared on her Instagram on Friday evening, poolside, at what looked like a resort, not a conference hotel. Her in a yellow sundress, sunglasses, holding a drink. The caption said, "Desert air." I studied the photo the way I study a maintenance log, looking for detail. There was a hand in the lower right corner of one image, male, wearing a silver watch. I didn't need to zoom in. I already knew. I screenshotted it anyway and went back to making dinner. Saturday, she posted 2 more. One was a sunset over red rock formations. Beautiful, honestly. The second was her laughing at a table with other people. Wine glasses everywhere. Restaurants with that specific kind of warm amber lighting that costs money to achieve. She looked genuinely happy. Lighter than she'd looked in our house in a year. I thought about that for a while. I thought about what it means when someone looks happier away from you than with you. I didn't feel bitter about it exactly. I felt something more like clarity. Sunday, I cleaned the house, changed the sheets, moved some things around, and I texted Ingrid. Ingrid Solberg had moved in next door 14 months earlier. She'd transferred to Raleigh for work, something in biotech project management that I never fully understood despite her explaining it 3 times. She was 41, recently divorced, had 2 teenage kids who were with her ex in Charlotte most weeks. She kept to herself mostly, but she'd started stopping by my garage when she heard me working on weekends. She liked the logic of mechanical things. I liked that she asked real questions and waited for the real answers. We were friends. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly friends, which, in my experience, is rare between adults of opposite sexes and worth protecting. I hadn't let myself think about her as anything else while I was still trying to figure out what was left of my marriage. But my marriage was over. The paperwork was filed, and Ingrid was someone I wanted in my life. I texted her, "You free today? Could use some company." She texted back in 10 minutes. "Give me an hour." She came over with a 6-pack of a craft IPA she knew I liked, and we sat on the back porch until after dark. I told her everything. Scottsdale, the ultimatum, the lawyer, all of it. She listened the way she always did. Fully, without filling the silence with reassurances I didn't need. When I was done, she said, "How do you feel?" Like someone finally took a weight off my chest that I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't supposed to be there. She nodded. "That's a good sign." We sat out there a long time. The kind of quiet that doesn't need to be filled. Miriam came home Sunday at 8:30. I was in the living room reading. I heard her key in the door, the specific sound of her rolling her carry-on across the hardwood. And then silence, just for a second, just long enough. She came around the corner and stopped. Ingrid was in the armchair across from me, barefoot, holding a mug of tea, mid-sentence about something she'd read that week. She looked up. Miriam looked at her, then at me. "Who is this?" she said. "This is Ingrid," I said. "She lives next door." Miriam set her bag down slowly. "What is she doing in my house?" "Our house," I said. "And she's visiting." I want to be fair here. I'm not going to pretend I didn't know exactly what it would look like. I did, but I also want to be clear. Ingrid and I had not crossed any line. We were sitting in separate chairs, fully clothed, having a conversation. The fact that Miriam's mind went somewhere doesn't change what was actually true. What I hadn't told Ingrid until that moment, and what I told Miriam then, in a flat, even tone, was that I'd filed for divorce the previous Tuesday. Ingrid's mug stopped halfway to her mouth. Miriam went white. "You what?" she said. "I meant it," I said. "When I said I was out, I was out." She sat down on the couch, not dramatically. More like her legs just made the decision for her. You have to tell me. You have to talk to me before you do something like that." "I told you in the kitchen," I said. "You told me you'd be back Sunday night." She looked at Ingrid again. Ingrid quietly stood up and said, "I'll let you two." And I said, "You don't have to go anywhere, Ingrid. This is going to be short. It wasn't cruel. It was just accurate. What followed over the next 3 weeks was the full range of things you'd expect. Miriam was furious, then devastated, then calculating, then desperate, and then, eventually, quiet in a way I recognized, because it was the same quiet I'd been living in for 8 months. She wanted to know about Ingrid. I told her the truth. Ingrid and I were friends. That whatever might develop between us had nothing to do with the reasons I was leaving. "The reasons you're leaving," she repeated, like it was a phrase in a foreign language she was parsing. "Yes. And those are? You know what they are." She did. She didn't say his name. I didn't say it either. It didn't matter anymore. The reasons were older and deeper than Stafford Klein. She asked if we could try counseling. I told her honestly that I'd have said yes to counseling 18 months ago. That door had closed. Not out of spite. I genuinely believe I would have walked through it a year and a half ago, if she'd been willing to open it. But that's the thing about waiting too long to address what's wrong. The person on the other side of the wall doesn't wait forever. They find a way to go around it. We sold the house. Split everything down the middle, which was easier than I expected because neither of us wanted to fight over furniture. She moved into an apartment in a newer part of the city. I rented a smaller place closer to the airport, a 2-bedroom with a decent garage. I set it up the way I wanted. Tools organized properly. A workbench with real lighting. I'm going to tell you about the text she sent, because it matters. It was 6 weeks after we both moved out. I was in the middle of refinishing a vintage motorcycle frame I'd picked up at an estate sale, something I'd wanted to do for years and never had the space for. My phone buzzed. It was Miriam. A long text. The summary: Stafford had ended things. He'd apparently never had any intention of leaving his current relationship. She was devastated. She didn't know what to do. She said she'd made a mistake. She said she missed me. She asked if we could talk. I read it twice. Then I put the phone face down on the workbench, picked up my sandpaper, and went back to work. 20 minutes later, I picked up the phone and deleted the message. Not out of anger. Anger had left me by then. I deleted it because there was nothing in that message I could do anything with, not because she didn't deserve compassion. I think she probably did, and I genuinely hope she found her way through it. But I wasn't the person to give it to her anymore. I'd already grieved the marriage. I'd done that quietly, over a long time, while she was still in the house. By the time she texted me that night, I'd been on the other side of it for a while already. That's the thing no one talks about, really. The person who pulls away slowly does their grieving early. By the time it's officially over, they've already rebuilt something. Ingrid and I had our first real date, 3 months after Miriam and I signed the final paperwork. We went to a Lebanese place she liked in downtown Raleigh. I was nervous in a way I hadn't been nervous about anything in a long time. Not the anxious kind of nervous. The kind where something matters. She ordered for both of us because she knew the menu and I told her to. She was right about everything she ordered. We talked for 3 hours. Not about the divorce, not about the past year, not about anything heavy. We talked about the things we actually wanted to talk about. Her work, my work, a trail she'd been hiking, a problem I was having with a fuel pump I couldn't figure out. Normal things, good things. When the check came, we split it. Walking back to her car, she stopped to look at something in a shop window, and I stopped next to her. She leaned into my arm slightly, just for a second, not asking anything. Just there. That's the moment I remember. Not the dinner, not the conversation, not any specific thing that was said. Just that second on the sidewalk, when it was clear that something was beginning. That was worth beginning. It's been 9 months now. Some things I'll tell you plainly. I sleep better than I have in 4 years. My work is cleaner. I noticed things I used to let slide past me when my head was full of everything at home. I've finished the motorcycle. It runs beautifully. Darren came down last month and we took it out on a Sunday morning and neither of us talked much, and it was perfect. Ingrid stays over 2 or 3 nights a week. Her kids come up from Charlotte once a month, and both of them are the kind of teenagers who make you think there might be hope for everything after all. Curious, direct, not particularly interested in performing anything for anyone. Her son spent an entire Saturday in my garage asking questions about engines. At the end of it, he said, "This is actually really cool," with the specific tone teenagers use when they've been genuinely surprised by something. I'll take that. I don't have any anger left toward Miriam. I want to be clear about that. What I have is something more neutral. A memory of someone I knew for 17 years, most of which was real and decent. Some of which was a slow unwinding I couldn't stop. People are complicated. Marriages are complicated. The ending of ours was not entirely her fault, even if the specific shape of it was. I stopped making her a villain in the story because she isn't one. She's just a person who made choices, same as everyone. I told a colleague at work about all of this a few months ago. He'd been going through something similar, a marriage that felt like it was held together by routine and avoidance. He asked me what I wished I'd known earlier. I thought about it seriously before I answered. I wish I'd known, I said finally. That saying it out loud doesn't make it real. The real part happened months before the words did. The words are just how you let the other person know you've already arrived somewhere new. He nodded for a long time. And the quiet thing? He asked. He knew about my reputation at work for being the person who doesn't say much. The quiet thing is this, I said. Being quiet doesn't mean you're not watching. It doesn't mean you're not thinking. It doesn't mean you're going to keep accepting something that isn't acceptable just because you haven't loudly objected yet. He asked what finally made me say the ultimatum out loud. I thought about that morning in the kitchen. Her with the registration confirmation on the screen. The deliberate way she'd said, Stafford will be there too. She told me something in the way she said it. I said, not the words, the delivery. She wasn't informing me. She was testing me. And I passed her test, just not the way she expected. He looked at me. I said what I meant. I said what I meant. I said. And then I did what I said. That's it, really. That's the whole thing. I drove home that evening with the windows down, the particular smell of spring in North Carolina coming in warm and green and complicated the way it always does. I had dinner with Ingrid. We watched something bad on television, then laughed at it. I fell asleep on the couch, and she woke me up at midnight to go to bed, the way people do when they've built something real and easy and unperformed. My phone was on the kitchen counter. No unread messages. Nothing I needed to deal with. I went to bed. I've thought about what actually happened between Miriam and me, not the events, but the mechanism underneath them. The way things unravel isn't usually dramatic. It's quiet and incremental, like metal fatigue. You can't see it from the outside. You can't even feel it most of the time. And then one day you apply ordinary pressure, and the thing just gives. What I've come to understand is that the choices we make, not the big ones, but the small repeated ones, are what build the structure we end up living inside. Miriam made small choices for years. So did I. Hers were about turning towards something outside our marriage and treating my patience like it had no bottom. Mine were about staying quiet too long and confusing endurance with loyalty. Neither of us woke up one morning and decided to wreck something. We just kept making the small choices, and eventually the structure they built was not one either of us could live in. That's what I mean when I say this isn't about blame. Blame is for people who think one person holds all the weight of what goes wrong. In my experience, that's almost never true. What's true is that everyone involved made choices, and those choices had consequences, and the consequences arrived whether or not anyone was ready for them. The part I keep coming back to is the integrity piece. Not integrity in the abstract, inspirational poster sense. I mean it in the engineering sense. Structural integrity. When a system has it, it holds under pressure. When it doesn't matter how good it looks from the outside. Miriam and I had lost structural integrity long before Scottsdale. Scottsdale was just the load test that made the failure visible. What I did, filing the paperwork, being honest with Ingrid, holding to what I'd said in that kitchen, wasn't revenge. I want to be careful about that because I think people misread quiet resolve as coldness or calculation. It wasn't. It was just a man finally acting in alignment with what he actually believed. I believed the marriage was over. I acted accordingly. There's something straightforward about that, even when it hurts. The intelligence in that, if there is any, is just this: knowing the difference between a problem you can solve and a situation you need to accept. I spent too long treating our marriage like a problem I could solve with more patience, more space, more silence. At some point I had to accept what it actually was. Acceptance isn't giving up. It's honest. And honest is where you have to start if you're going to build anything that holds. Ingrid didn't fix me. I want to be clear about that too. I was already through the worst of it before our first real date. What she gave me was something simpler. Proof that the thing I'd been missing wasn't some rare impossible thing. It was just two people choosing to be honest with each other, consistently, without drama. That's available to anyone willing to require it of themselves and the people they let close. I said what I meant. I did what I said. I kept going. That's everything, really.